You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that reveals facts, truth, research, and statistics and never messes around. We lay down the entire truth about everything regarding your Detroit and Michigan sports teams, no matter if it's good or bad. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website at MichiganSportsTruth.com, follow us on Twitter at Michigan_Truth, and like our Facebook page, The Michigan Sports Truth. The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
And episode 315 of the Week in Review is live and in session. Taylor Phillips and Buck Geno here. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno3, 3 eyes for Roman numerals. Got a full plate tonight. This week, Pistons, Red Wings, Tigers, and even Lions. A little bit of even a Lions update. But let's get to the Pistons first. Big stuff on Stan Van Gundy.
Left sideline, 3, and he answers.
According to ESPN, the Pistons are considering keeping Stan Van Gundy only as head coach and prefer to make front office changes. According to ESPN, Tom Gores plans to do so. They might remove Stan Van Gundy only as team president, but still keep him as head coach. They also might consider getting rid of Jeff Bauer as their general manager. Jeff Bauer's in the final year of his contract as well, so if that happens, maybe Tom Gores maybe has at least a little bit of integrity left in him after all.
Yeah, they've been talking for a long time, and I think that I still stand by the old adage that no news is good news, but there's obviously some deep conversations going on with Tom Gores, Stan Van Gundy, and obviously others. But if you look at it, I mean, with the report that he being Tom Gores, looking to maybe move some guys around front office-wise, but leave Stan Van Gundy as the head coach, tells me a couple of things. It tells me, one, that they don't have a coaching candidate that they have in mind that would be better than Stan Van Gundy. He's got 1 year left on his contract, so there's no reason to move on from him at this point, unless there's somebody markedly better. And in my opinion, there's not. That they could go out and get reasonably. I mean, you see some of the coaches that are being hired, and yes, they might be better than Stan Van Gundy, but they probably aren't interested in coming to Detroit. The job has not been made officially open, so it's much harder to recruit those coaches. And with the uncertainty in the front office, coaches don't like to go into that sort of situation, because if they fire the general manager and they fire the team president, well, now they got new guys coming in, and you might not be their guy. So it's not really attractive to any head coaches out there that might be better than Stan Van Gundy, because they don't know what's going on in the front office. And I think we're kind of coming to the point now where there might be some clarity into the situation. Jeff Bauer might be the scapegoat in this whole thing. He might be removed from his post as general manager. And Stan Van Gundy could remain the head coach, but he may have his team president title modified or removed. So that all said, I'm going to stick to the original thought that I had during this process. I don't think Stan Van Gundy is going anywhere. It's really going to depend on what his roles are. I don't know if they would move him from the team president role. If they do, what you could see is them bringing in somebody like a Chauncey Billups or somebody else that has made it known that they're looking for a front office job, and still retain Stan Van Gundy as head coach for the final year of his contract. the ESPN report also mentioned they could be looking at other options. Obviously, people immediately look at Jeff Bauer and his position as general manager as being the most tenuous. And that stands to reason simply because somebody has to answer for all these missed draft picks, poor roster construction as a whole, and also their lack of success on the court. And even though Stan Van Gundy, the coach, hasn't done his best job, they can look to reasons like Reggie Jackson being hurt as one of the reasons they didn't have much success this year. The trade at the trade deadline for Blake Griffin and the multiple moves that occurred within that time frame as far as roster spots were concerned, they can lean on that a little bit and say that Stan Van Gundy really didn't have his whole team to work with as a head coach. Part of that does fall on him, though, as the team president for his responsibility as well. So I think that Tom Gores is taking a real long, hard look at what's going on here and trying to decide if Stan Van Gundy is going to be the guy that either leads this team on the court or leads this team in the front office and somebody else takes a hold of the team on the court. It's been a really long time since these discussions have started, and I still maintain that I don't think Stan Van Gundy will be without a job next year, or next season, I should say. But it stands to reason that if they're taking this long to really think long and hard about this decision, Tom Gores has to be weighing all of his options, because you're not looking at a great offseason, regardless of who you're able to bring in, who you're not able to, simply because you don't have a first-round draft pick in all likelihood. So you're not going to have one of those. Their last two draft picks, Luke Kennard and Henry Ellenson, have not done what they thought they would have, especially picking where they were. And you have a team coming back that a lot of people still think the jury is out. And Andre Drummond's going to be entering his 8th season as a Piston, and people still really don't know exactly what his potential is or what his ceiling is. And you have Reggie Jackson coming back off an injury, and you have a couple other guys that are coming back that you spent some money on last year and you barely used them. So I'm thinking that's part of the conversation as well. I mean, they had to have Langston Galloway, and then they barely used him. And so I think that there's a lot of things that are going on for the Pistons right now. And I think also that if Tom Gores hasn't made a move by now, that if he is considering one, he is making sure that all of his T's and has been crossed, all his I's have been dotted before he goes ahead and moves forward. So the mystery somewhat continues because we don't know what's going to happen. But this ESPN report has given a little bit of clarity to the situation in regards to where Tom Gores is heading, and that could be a front office restructure. And as I've mentioned before, I don't think they really have a whole lot of choices to move on at the head coaching position, because if you're a head coach, that situation doesn't sound very enticing. Because if you're moving the front office chips around and you bring a new head coach in, well, those guys might not be there next year because contracts expire. And Bauer and Van Gundy have been kind of tied at the hip with the contracts. And if you decide to move on from them after the next season, bring new guys in, that leaves the head coach kind of out in the middle of nowhere. And you may have a guaranteed contract, but that doesn't mean that you will be working past that year. So it's an interesting situation, and it just really starts to get monotonous because there is no news, and we can keep thinking about what's going to happen, or we can try to guess of what the moves are going to be, but until they happen, it's going to be really hard to nail down exactly what Tom Gores is going to do with this team. So I think that when it all boils down and finally gets brought to the table as far as the decision is going to be concerned, the person that's probably most likely to move on from the team as a whole is Jeff Bauer, because if the general manager. He's got one left of the year on his contract, and there's not really anywhere else to put him. So maybe he's the guy that gets scapegoated, and they move somebody else into that GM or team president spot and leave Stan Van Gundy just to coach the basketball team. He still will have some personnel input, obviously, as the head coach, but he won't be nearly as powerful if he doesn't have that team president role. So the saga continues, and I think that it's one of those things where we just have to let it play out, and the speculation is fun, but at the same time, it's just really, at this point, that's what it is. It's conjecture, it's speculation. Nobody knows what Tom Gores is going to do, and I'm not sure even Tom Gores knows what Tom Gores is going to do. So
Correct.
It's something interesting to keep following, but until there's actual hard, concrete evidence coming from Tom Gores himself, it's going to be really hard to nail down exactly what's going to happen.
Yep. So we'll keep an eye on things between Tom Gores and Stan Van Gundy and Jeff Bauer throughout the entire offseason to see what happens there. So, switching to hockey. Red Wings prospect Givani Smith was targeted with racial slurs from opposing players during a game. He flipped the double bird against the opposing bench and got suspended by a game by the OHL. According to ESPN, one of the prospects of the Detroit Red Wings, who are meantime projected to select Quentin Hughes, a defenseman from the University of Michigan, as their 6th overall pick in the 2018 NHL draft, also received racial remarks on social media as well. His OHL team, the Kitchener Rangers, as they advanced to in a 6-game series, 4 games to 2, when beating Sarnia 6-2 in Game 6, said, quote, "We want to make sure Givani is comfortable and certainly hopefully free from any challenge or issue." So, Givani Smith reacted the wrong way, but they forced his anger that opposing bench forced the anger to get the best of him, and he just felt too aggravated and too annoyed because it's a racial remark. You can't take that. That got him started. He had no choice. He had to stand up for himself. You can't just. You still have to suspend him for making an inappropriate gesture in public, but still, there's got to be prices to pay, and that's going to be our bullet point for our guilty or not guilty segment later on at the end of the show. But any racial remarks is going to get you in major trouble. Period.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that he has to go through this. And the suspension, while it was warranted because of the actions that he took, the OHL definitely has to look into this a lot deeper and find out exactly what triggered this incident, and get to the bottom of who's letting this happen, where it's coming from, and get the full story. And if there needs to be additional suspensions or discipline handed out to the opposing team, then that needs to happen as well. So I think that Givani Smith, he's a kid. You're not talking about a seasoned professional that is used to give and take and is really disciplined in how to act when those things happen. Not saying that he was wrong in what he did. It wasn't it's a real gray area, because I don't think that he was wrong necessarily. But at the same time, when you do that kind of stuff, you're going to get a suspension. I mean, it's just going to happen. But I think that the OHL, like I said, has to look into this a little bit deeper, because those aren't things that just happen overnight. Those are things that happen as the series or as the season goes on. And if you're requiring a police escort for a junior hockey team because of threats and racial slurs, there needs to be some accountability. And I think that the league is going to have to step in and really get to the bottom of this, because if you let it go unchecked, then you're basically saying that, yeah, we know that you shouldn't have to do that, or shouldn't have to deal with that, but you shouldn't have done what you did, because it's really hard for anybody to stand in his shoes and say, yeah, you shouldn't react to that, because that's not something that you or I or many people deal with on a daily basis. So I understand where they came from on the suspension. I understand that he had to be punished for the gesture that he made, but at the same time, I mean, if you're getting death threats from people and you're getting harassed by either players or personnel or even fans, the league has to step in. And I think that they will at some point find out exactly what triggered this. They'll get to the bottom of where this is coming from, and they'll act appropriately. Givani Smith is in all likelihood going to be on the Grand Rapids Griffins next year, and all of professional sports leagues, from the lowest of the minors all the way up to the highest professional ranks, have made a concerted effort to try to get this stuff out of the game. It's not going to completely be removed, because you can't get rid of all the idiots, but you also have to make sure that that player, if you're the Red Wings, your prospect, doesn't have to deal with that crap. And I think that for him, it's a tough situation to go through. He's going to learn from it. I think that once he gets to Grand Rapids next year, being as it's a higher level, it's a professional level now, not just on the junior level, a lot more precautions can be put into place, and a lot more security measures can be enacted to prevent that kind of stuff from happening. Like I said, you can't get rid of all the idiots. I'm sure it'll happen again, because somebody's going to be stupid. But
You can't think stupid, but you can punish it.
yeah, you can definitely punish it, and you can try to make it go away, or you can try to make it so that if that does happen, there are clear and devastating consequences. So, like I said, the OHL is probably going to be digging into this and finding out exactly what's going on, and also the Red Wings, because this is their prospect. They're for sure going to be making sure that this situation is handled correctly, and I'm sure that they've had a talk with him. I'm sure that they've been in contact with the OHL, and whatever happens, because Givani Smith won't be on that team next year for all intents and purposes, some of those punishments are going to ring a little bit hollow, but boy, it's just one of those things that you can't just say, well, you know, he's going to be gone next year, we really can't do anything. Whatever they find out, whether it be something that the team is responsible for, the opposing team, the Sioux Greyhounds, or individuals that are associated with that team, they have to be punished, and punished severely. So we'll see how this pans out here in the later months as we wind through summer. But Givani Smith, he reacted poorly, but at the same time, and I'm not going to sit here and say that he shouldn't have done that, because I'm not in his shoes, nor will I ever be. So I think that he understands what he did was probably not the right reaction, or at least it wasn't the preferred method of dealing with it. But at the same time, you have to have some empathy and some understanding of where he's coming from. So hopefully they can get this under control. And if there needs to be additional punishment handed out, it needs to be not done so swiftly and severely.
Yeah. Why don't we get that guilty or not guilty segment over with right freaking now?
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant
Guilty or not guilty.
I deem Givani Smith not guilty, and the opposing bench and people directing racial remarks in person and on social media guilty. Because racism is not tolerated in society at all, ever, period. Simple.
I'm gonna have to agree. I'm gonna say that he's, and again, you get to this gray line now where he's guilty of doing something that obviously can't just go unchecked. But at the same time, anybody else faced with that, and nobody is in the head of Givani Smith. Nobody knows,
right? No matter what color,
what he's going through, or what he's having to persevere through. You're talking about a kid here. I mean, we're not talking about somebody who's 35, 40 years old. We're talking about somebody who's just starting out his professional career. And like I said, I can't hold him. You can be held accountable at the same time, understanding where it's coming from. So while I agree with that suspension that he was given, I don't think that he's guilty necessarily, simply because if this is all true, or even if some of it's true, that's a lot of pressure and a lot of undue stress that's put on a kid who's just trying to play some hockey. And regardless if you think he's a good prospect, or regardless if you think he's going to be a viable NHL player, it doesn't matter at this point. We're not even talking about his ability. And I've seen some of those comments where people say, "Well, he's not going to be on the Red Wings. He's probably not going to make." Well, that doesn't really matter, and it shouldn't be tolerated. It shouldn't be condoned. And whoever's at fault needs to be punished. And if it's something that's coming from a team, from the fans or the personnel or the players, they're responsible for those people. And they need to know that if that's happening and they're not taking action, somebody will help you do it. Whether that be the OHL or whether that be the NHLPA. I'm not sure if there's
any league level.
I'm not sure if there's a governing body necessarily for him at the junior level when it comes to player representation, but somebody is going to have to do something, and hopefully they are able to find out what caused it and punish the guilty parties.
Yep. So that's our guilty or not guilty segment. Now transitioning to baseball.
That one is long gone.
The Tigers took 2 of 3 against the Tampa Bay Rays at home last week, and then they went into Kansas City and played the terrible Royals, and they lost 3 of 4.
You are pathetic!
And Fox Sports Detroit, prior to that 10-6 loss yesterday, said the Tigers were manufacturing runs.
You stupid.
Well, they kind of are. Problem is that they are also giving them up. And when you're talking about manufacturing runs, well, that's when...
Well, let me point something out. Against the Tampa Bay Rays, they only averaged 2 to 3 runs. They scored 2 to 3 runs per game. That's it. That's not That is not proof. Definitely not proof that you're manufacturing runs. You have to manufacture a lot more runs than that to prove it. And then after the 10-6 loss, they go back to scoring just 2 to 3 runs a game the last 3 games, and they lose they lose 2 of the last 3.
Yeah, you're manufacturing runs. That's great. What that really is telling me is that they're not able to be proficient offensively. Manufacturing runs is, in my eyes, kind of a backhanded compliment, because you're talking about a team that, okay, well, they're not getting a lot of guys on base, or they're not hitting with a lot of extra base power. A lot of the ways that are commonly associated with a strong offense. Now, if you're talking about manufacturing runs, well, that doesn't mean that you can't hit for average or you can't hit for power. Making runs out of nothing is an ability. But when you're only scoring 2 to 3 runs a game, what you're telling me is that they're just in a slump and they're making do with what they have. So they're not getting shut out. But when you're scoring 2 to 3 runs a game, period, with one outlier in the week, what you're really trying to tell me is that they're not going well. And obviously injuries have taken a toll with Miguel Cabrera getting hurt, and he's the centerpiece of your lineup. But that doesn't mean that other guys just are relieved of their responsibility. And this offense is going to struggle at times this year, and this is one of those periods because if you look at the lineups they put out there without Miguel Cabrera, there's just not a lot of power there. There's just not a lot of scary hitters, if any, in that lineup when he's gone. And with the situation that this team is in, you got a lot of young guys that are getting their first real taste of extended major league action. You're going to have some periods like this where you're just not scoring a whole bunch of runs. And with the pitching staff that Detroit has, that's not going to be good enough a lot of times. You're putting a lot of pressure on those guys who are in the back end of the bullpen and also the starters. If you know going in that you're only going to get 2 or 3 runs, that's a tremendous amount of pressure. Because it's real hard to go into that game knowing that these guys are only going to get me a couple. I can't make any mistakes, and that just augments any of the normal pressure or responsibility that the starters and the bullpen have. So, not a great week for them offensively. Like you mentioned, they took 2 out of 3 from the Rays. They scored a grand total of 5 runs in their 2 victories. And then they lost the other game 3-2. They scored 7 runs in 3 games and somehow won 2 of them. And then they go to Kansas City and they score 13 runs in 4 games and only win 1 of them. So the pitching staff, while it's not great, that's a lot to put on them, especially with the personnel that they have. They had a bullpen blow up on Friday. Late in the game, they scored 2 runs in the top of the 8th, only to see 4 runs come back at them in the bottom of the 8th. You blew it! And ended up losing that game 4-2. And then they lost another couple of games, only scoring 2 runs apiece. That's just not going to get you a whole lot of wins. I'm sorry. And to look at the Rays, who are all right now, they're not doing the greatest either in terms of the offensive side of the ledger. You were lucky to win 2 of those 3. So, Fox Sports, obviously, they get paid because the Tigers pay them to carry the game, so they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, but to come across with, well, they're manufacturing runs. And that just tells me that they're trying to put lipstick on a pig instead of saying they're struggling right now. And that's something to be expected with a lineup full of the guys that they have available to them. And I think that Ron Gardenhire
or Gardenhire,
he's tried to defend his players as best he can because that's what managers do.
I'm not doing all.
The manager can't hit. The manager can't go up there and hit for you.
Of course not.
And you can tell them all the things that they need to do, but if they don't execute it, as they quite obviously are not executing right now, you're not going to score a lot. So, maybe they get hot a little bit here later on. Maybe Cabrera comes back and is able to give them stability. But, boy, you just look at the lineups they're putting out there, and that does not spell runs for a lot of the time that they're out there.
Yeah. That's why I boycott Tigers games, especially on Fox Sports Detroit. I hashtag boycott FSD, boycott the Tigers, and boycott the Red Wings, and so on and so on our Twitter handle at Michigan_Truth and on our Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth. We run those campaigns because we do it with heart, passion, and mind. And we are 100% aggressive and 100% passionate, 100% smart. So, Tigers go to Texas and play the Rangers Monday and Tuesday at 8:05. And then they return home and play the Seattle Mariners after having Thursday off. Friday at 7:10, Saturday at 4:10, Sunday at 1:10. The Texas Rangers are in last place in the AL West, 13-23, 9 games back of the Los Angeles Angels, with Shohei Ohtani. And then the Seattle Mariners, third place, 19-14. AL West isn't too bad, isn't too great either. The Angels are 21-13, but the Mariners have a pretty decent, slightly over 500 record while in third place. 5 games above 500, only a game and a half back of those Halos. The defending champion, Astros, Houston, in between, of course, 1 game back. That competition's heating up.
Yeah, I mean, when you get towards the quarter full of the season, as we're getting close to here now, things start to take shape. And boy, the AL Central, I should say, is just a brutal mess.
Yep, usual. The AL Comedy Central.
I mean, the Tigers were in second. I don't know if they're still in second place.
They're in third place now, 14-19. Yeah. Third place in the AL Comedy Central. Now 6 spots and 5.5 games out of the second AL wildcard spot because the Minnesota Twins jumped them with the Tigers loss 4-2 to the Kansas City Royals, and the Minnesota Twins beating the Chicago White Sox 5-3 at Guaranteed Rate Field in the south side of Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, when your best team is 500, and that's Cleveland right now, that's not a real strong division.
Talk about putting a sour cherry on top of a crap sundae.
Yeah, I mean, that division is not strong, and it hasn't been for quite some time.
Weak. Yeah, very weak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get a wild card out of there. Usually, your division champ is your only representative.
Even I'm surprised that they can't even reach one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball, the Baltimore Orioles, 8-26, last place in the AL East. They are actually tied with the worst record with the Cincinnati Reds, 8-26. Last place in the NL Central.
Yeah, and Cincinnati's just bad. I mean, they're just awful.
So is Baltimore. Yeah, they're both bad.
Yeah, but yeah, when you get back to the AL Central, I mean, the Tigers were in second place until today. The Tigers were in second place. And we're talking about in getting into mid-May here. I mean, that's not good if you're...
Well, we're still in the beginning of
the AL Central.
But we're getting close to the middle of May.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to be there shortly. And to say that the Tigers were in second place is just... It's mind-boggling watching that team and saying that's the second place team in the division. Now third, but still, just it doesn't speak well for the AL Central. And like I said, the Cleveland Indians right now at 500. As we get deeper into the season and a lot more of those divisional matchups start to take place, obviously some movement will happen. But right now, it's just the Tigers are what they are, and somehow, by the grace of being in the division that they're in, they're still mathematically not that far away. And they're 2.5 games out of first. All it takes is a decent series from one team and a bad series from another team, and you're in first place. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. But it is the state of the AL Central. It's been that way, like I said, for some time. And the Tigers right now are benefiting from that simply because they can point to where they're at in the standings and say, well, we're not that far off. Well, technically you're not. But if you're going to match them against some of the better teams in Major League Baseball, they are still light years behind some of those teams. And I think that it just is right now a way for the Tigers to say that they've had some modicum of success when they really haven't.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the upcoming matchup between the Tigers and Rangers, the Tigers mathematically are 2.5 games ahead of the Texas Rangers. Just 2.5 games ahead of the Texas Rangers. I see them. I'm not. I saw them declining toward that too. I'm not sure if they're going to continue to decline when they play the Rangers, even when they're on the road. But they're really bad on the road. 6-11 on the road, not quite terrible. Almost in between terrible and 500. 8-8 at home, but the Mariners 11-6 on the road, 8-8 at home. That's a rarity. That's going to be an interesting weekend for the Tigers and M's.
Yeah, and the Tigers on the road haven't been great, and they've got to wrap up a 3-game series here with Texas before they finally get home. So it'll be interesting. Maybe the Tigers can get the bats moving and start to have some bigger offensive outputs. But boy, this week was just brutal.
If you want the Tigers to win, yeah, but if you want the Tigers to lose, you hope for the opposite.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're a Tigers fan, if you want them to win, I guess it's okay for you. But
it only favors Chris Illich, by the way.
Yeah, I would prefer that they be entertainingly bad. And so far, with the close games that they've been losing, that would still fall under my definition of entertainingly bad, because those games are close. The outcomes are in doubt until the final pitch. And so if you're looking for entertainment, but you also want to tank, boy, I think they're fitting the bill right now.
Yeah, and speaking of entertainingly bad, it's as entertainingly bad as Leonys Martin having a fly ball in left center hit the top of his head and drop in for a hit. Or drop in for an error, rather. Not a hit, but a two-base error, scoring Lucas Duda while Alex Gordon reaches second base on a Saturday when the Tigers still hang on to win. The Royals almost came back to at least tie it up. There was no guarantee that the Royals were going to win anyway, but Shane Green almost got another blown save, but that was not all his fault. He allowed Lucas Duda to reach base, but Leonys Martin, that error is going to be on SportsCenter's not top 10 nominees this upcoming Friday.
Yeah, I mean, they tried to give that game away. They finally were able to
They
win.
tried to get swept.
Yeah, by the Royals.
Oh, man. How glorious would that have been? So, I think we've covered all the ground on the Tigers. Now, only one team left to cover, and that's the Lions.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
They have traded defensive tackle Akeem Spence to the Miami Dolphins for a conditional 2019 draft pick, and that's our What's Your Grade segment.
Pencils down, everyone. It's time to find out what's your grade.
Okay.
It was curious. We'll talk about it. I'm going to talk about it a little bit and then kind of give it a grade after I've kind of gone over it. Now, Akeem Spence was signed to a 3-year deal.
Yeah, we're going to bottle up the analysis inside the segment.
Right. So he was given a 3-year deal last year. And when you're given a 3-year deal in the NFL, I know a lot of that doesn't mean a whole lot, but you look at the guaranteed money and try to find out exactly how much the team has invested in him. And earlier, they were able to get him to take what amounted to a pay cut. So they were able to remove some base salary, restructure his contract so that they could incentivize some of the money that he was supposed to earn in the latter stages of that contract. And then when they got that all solidified, they traded him to Miami for, as you mentioned, a conditional 7th-round draft pick next year. I heard some thoughts on this earlier from some of the local talk shows, and it seems interesting to me because Bob Quinn gave him that 3-year deal last year. And knowing that he was hoping to get Matt Patricia in as the head coach, and he finally was able to do so at the end of last week.
Static.
It's interesting to note that the reason that they gave him a 3-year contract is now also the reason that they're able to trade him, because they were able to get him to take that pay cut, incentivize some of the money that he was supposed to earn in the next 2 years, and then allowed them to remove some money from the cap, and then they get rid of him. I just don't know if Bob Quinn really was that invested in Akeem Spence. He's not a very big guy when you're talking about a defensive tackle. With Matt Patricia coming in, he doesn't really fit the bill as a run-stuffing 3 technique.
Maybe not. No.
Does Spence. And he also isn't a pass rusher.
More static. We apologize for technical difficulties. Keep going.
Yeah. So I mean, when you're talking about Akeem Spence, I just don't think he fit the bill for the Lions, and they're able to get something out of nothing because it didn't seem like he was going to be on the squad coming after camp. I'm sure he would have been in camp and done his preseason work and everything else, but I didn't see a real spot for him on this roster. So they were able to get something out of nothing, which is a 7th round draft pick, and they were able to get that money off of their cap and get it to the Miami Dolphins, who just got rid of their defensive tackle in Dominican Sue. And so now they're going to move Akeem Spence into that role. And Akeem Spence is really a 4-3 guy. When you talk about defensive tackle, he's probably your 5 technique. And to put that in layman's terms, he's probably your outside defensive tackle. So he's going to be playing over a guard or maybe even a tackle at times. And in the 3-4 defense, which Matt Patricia really is leaning towards for his base set, Akeem Spence doesn't fit any of those roles. As I mentioned before, he's not a great upfield rusher. When it comes to passing, he's not big enough to take on a double team and stuff the run effectively in the middle of a 3-4 defensive alignment. So the writing was kind of on the wall when Matt Patricia got hired as head coach that Akeem Spence wasn't going to be a fit. So I think that while it was kind of curious that they signed a 3-year deal last year, knowing that at some point Bob Quinn was going to have to make a coaching change, and if he's making a coaching change, it's probably going to be a defensive shift in terms of philosophy. It was just real curious at the time that they gave him a 3-year deal, especially knowing that chances are Jim Caldwell wasn't going to be there for all 3 years. So while that all is being said, I think that this trade, they were able to get something. They were able to reduce his cap hit and then shuffle it off to Miami. I'm going to give them a B+ on this because at this point, they got something which really, at the end of camp, they probably would have got nothing because they probably would have cut him out. And the amount of dead money they would have had to keep on the cap was relatively low. And so they were able to turn that into a draft pick next year, which, if you can get any sort of draft capital at this point for a player that you're not going to be able to use, is a pretty shrewd move. So I'm going to give this one a B+. And the only reason I give it a B+ is because the fact that they negotiated his cap hit down, then traded him, which is for a $500,000 difference. I don't know if that was the difference between him getting traded or not.
Absolutely. Very good analysis on Akeem Spence. Didn't prove much, didn't do much. So 2019 draft pick, yes please. So that's our What's Your Grade segment. So for our audience, if they have a grade for that event, post it in the comment bank in this episode, and please don't go out of line. So that's episode 315 of the Week in Review. Before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media and have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth podcast is searching for a wider local audience that is fans of sports, especially our teams in the state of Michigan. So please spread the word about the Michigan Sports Truth podcast, its Facebook page, and its Twitter handle at Michigan_Truth. Buck, Geno, great job as always. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you next week.
No problem.
Yep. I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips and Buck Geno at Buck Geno III, 3 I's for Roman numerals. We'll talk to you next week on episode 316 of the Week in Review. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing TTFN. Ta-ta for now. Also, check out our podcast on Apple Podcasts via iTunes. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Bon appétit.
The hosts of the Michigan Sports Truth podcast do not take any suggestions or criticism from any member of its audience on how it should be run. It is up to the host to decide what they want to cover. They also do not intend to be any amount of popular in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Additionally, the views of the audience, right or wrong, do not reflect the actual truth revealed on this program.
Transmission complete.